As a senior in college, I've been coding regularly now for 6.5 years, and I can definitely say that that first few months that I started coding back when I was a sophomore in high school was definitely the hardest. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been challenges and a lot to learn since then, but what I realized is once I got over that little hump, everything got a lot easier despite learning harder and harder material. At the time, I never thought much about it. I just figured I was new to programming, and naturally, just like anything else, it takes time to learn how to code, and specifically for me, to learn how C++ work. Now, obviously there is something to be said about learning how to code. You have to learn how to type everything in a specific format so that the computer can understand it. However, what I've realized recently is that the bigger problem is people's inability to strategically problem solve. I remember back when I was going through middle school and high school, people would say going to college taught them how to think. And I always thought this sounded kind of dumb. And for the record, I still think this sounds kind of dumb. But if I was going to say anything, I would say learning how to program is what taught me how to think. Speaking of my own experiences going through middle school and high school, and depending where you went to school, maybe your experiences were different, but just for me, I would say there were probably two categories of classes. Ones that are about memorization, such as social studies or science, where you just had to memorize a certain set of facts, and if you could regurgitate those well enough for a test, you'd get an A. Or something like a math class where there was definitely an element of problem solving, but they also told you the formulas, they told you the ways that you had to approach the problems, and as long as you could remember those and apply them, you'd do well on the test. And for me, computer science doesn't really fall into either of those categories. If I were to relate programming to that previous point, I would say that the physical act of coding and typing things in is somewhat related to what you do in school. You have to memorize the different syntax and learn how to apply it in specific situations to get the output that you want. And the funny thing about it, at least it seems funny to me now in retrospect, is that when I was in high school, no one was talking about the act of doing the problem solving. Almost everyone seemed to be focused on the actual code, typing in the commands that were going to make the thing pop out on the screen that you wanted to. And now when I look back, it wasn't so much about doing the code. Sure, you needed to know those commands to get it to do what you wanted, but in a lot of cases, you just didn't even know which things you were supposed to be typing because you didn't know how to solve the problem in the first place. Now, it's possible that some programs do this, whether it's in high school or a summer camp or in college, but if I was going to go back and I was going to learn how to program again, the one thing I would tell myself is separate the problem-solving aspect of it from the coding aspect. So, before you write a single line of code, before you sit down and type anything, actually solve the problem by hand. Figure out what you're going to do, how you strategically would solve that problem, not even introducing C++ or any other language into the equation. And then only once you're confident that you actually know how to solve the problem and work your way through it, then you can sit down and write the code. One of the worst things that I see people doing when they're new to programming, and I'm guilty of doing it myself when I was new to it, is when you write something and it doesn't work, and you just start changing seemingly random things in your code, hoping that it's going to work. Well, maybe if I change this line to this other thing, it'll work. And the unfortunate thing is when you're doing assignments for school and there's these auto graders and things that have certain test cases, a lot of times you can end up almost hard coding your assignment to pass them just by randomly changing things without really understanding what you're doing, not truly solving the problem, but passing a set of test cases just by manipulating your code. And like I said, when you do start coding, you will make syntax errors, and that's one thing if you just type something in the wrong way and you can't get your code to compile. But if you're changing large parts of your code and you don't really know why you're doing it, and you're just trying to get certain results to pop out in the console, that's when you need to take a step back and think about your actual approach to how you solve that problem. Did you actually go about it the correct way, and you just happen to type something in the wrong way? Or is your approach completely wrong and has nothing to do with the code you typed in? You typed in the code for the problem you thought you were solving, but you didn't solve the real problem. If you end up sticking with computer science and you take a whole bunch of courses on it, or you just go really in depth with it, this is something that will develop on its own. Over the past 6.5 years, like I've said, I've learned a lot about problem solving, and I don't need to separate the problem solving part of it from the coding part of it. I can generally do that all in one seamless operation. But if you're someone who's new to both of those things, new to actually typing in code, and you're new to the problem solving aspect of it, it's a really good idea to actually separate this. Do the problem solving, don't even do it in terms of code. Maybe you could do it in terms of pseudocode if you feel comfortable doing that, but don't write any code until you know you've actually gone about the problem the correct way, and you've run through some scenarios and say, would this work in this scenario? And try to think of some edge cases and say, would it work in those cases? And if not, what am I missing? And I realize there might be some people who are watching this video who don't think that this applies to them. And maybe it doesn't, depending on how long you've been programming and how good your problem solving skills are. You might not really have this issue. But if you think you might be in this boat, you're relatively new to programming, maybe you've been doing it for a few months, I would encourage you on your next assignment or the next thing that you code up, instead of jumping right into that code, just on a piece of scrap paper, work out how you're actually going to solve the problem, and make sure you really commit a lot of time to understanding what you're doing before you write any code. Alright guys, if you found this video helpful, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you know any other people who are new to programming, and if you're in high school or college, you probably do, feel free to share this video with them, because if it helped you, it can probably help them. Anyways, if you're new here, consider subscribing for new videos every week, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.